Hey guys, it's Troy Casey, Certified Health Nut, in an effort to bring you more fun, freedom, and phenomenon. This is Certified Health Nut Podcast today with Dr. Landon. He is a specialist in breast implant illness, explants, and I brought him on to the show because I think it's very important as the psychological warfare, there's transhumanism agenda, injections, exogenous material being injected into us and being sold as beauty, aesthetics, Kardashian type consciousness, but one injection is not enough. It's a constant, it's almost an addiction. And I've seen this for years and I have my own take on it, but I brought Dr. Landon here as an expert to talk from his perspective and put it in a clinical perspective of how the illness is affecting women mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So, Dr. Landon, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for all your work and having me on. It's exciting to be here.
Awesome. So please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your practice in West Palm and in Chicago.
Sure, happy to do that. So I'm a board certified plastic surgeon. I've been in practice since 2009, so about 16 years. And started in practice, doing a lot of breast cancer reconstruction, which was kind of my segue into doing explant surgery for breast implant illness. I also do, aesthetic plastic surgery, and we brought on investors about 5 years ago, which have really helped us scale the clinical practice. But now we're really focusing in on expanding the footprint for breast implant illness. So we've started breast implant illness centers of excellence with locations at our flagship in Rockford, which is outside Chicago. I'm also actively building up a explant practice in our Palm Beach location. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, hopefully out here in Scottsdale will be the next location. So we're starting to put together this consortium of like-minded surgeons and physicians that can all work together to really help raise awareness and help women that are suffering from breast implant illness, because there's a huge opportunity and just a huge need. And the more I learn and see and engage with like-minded people like you and really understand what's going on behind the scenes, just the more driven I am to make sure that I can do my part to help these women that are suffering, for the most part, unnecessarily, in my opinion.
Yeah, so let's scroll back here the last 50 years or so. Talk about the introduction of breast implants, maybe the promise back when they were introduced, the why women would get them in the past, and kind of bring it up to modern day times and what you're seeing as trends.
Sure. I mean, this goes back to the 60s. Cronin and Giroux developed the first breast implant. And, that was at a time when I think people weren't as open about their sexuality, and plastic surgery was very much something that wasn't really talked about. Obviously, we didn't have social media. I wasn't even born at that point. But, that this is something that was very private, and people associated it with kind of the rich and the famous only got plastic surgery in private. And, fast forward over the, past several decades, not much has changed as it relates to augmenting women that feel an inadequacy about their body, about their femininity, about their attractiveness, about, as, time has progressed, women feel that they're more sometimes competitive in the marketplace. They're more attractive for mate selection. They feel they have the perception that they're going to feel better about themselves and more confident if they do, an aesthetic procedure like a breast augmentation that's going to give them the confidence that they envision after the surgery. And obviously there's kind of a lot to unpack there, and we can talk about those, expectations and whether or not they're actually realistic or not. But, that's still why a lot of women are deciding to undergo breast augmentation. Probably the biggest difference between the 60s and now is, it's much more out in the open. So people are talking about it. Celebrities are talking about it, not only putting implants in, but now taking implants out for lots of reasons. People are wear it like a badge of honor, like that they had the resources and went through the process to feel better about themselves. And there's definitely something to be said about, making sure that you're feeling good about yourself and you're taking the steps to maintain the confidence in the body that you want. And that's really, as plastic surgeons, what we're here to help patients do, but it has to be done with appropriate expectation setting with the patients, understanding all the risks and the benefits of the surgery. And I think that's really where, the medical industry and plastic surgeons in particular have fallen short by not really communicating with prospective patients about what the real risks are, not only about breast augmentation, but about, surgery in general. We always try to set expectations with the patient and make sure that they understand what it is they're getting into, the permanency of the surgery. We always talk about risk-benefit ratio and making sure patients are doing these things as an ethical plastic surgeon for the right reasons. Number one, because it's the right thing to do, and number two, because we don't want to have patients that are unhappy after surgery. That's not good for the patient. That's not good for the surgeon. So
it's not good for business.
It's not good for anybody. So that's, if you're talking to somebody that's doing plastic surgery in an ethical way, and I think there's still a lot of plastic surgeons that hold themselves to that standard, they want to make sure to communicate that to patients. But specifically with, the breast implants and breast implant illness, it just has this tendency to get swept under the rug and is not really being highlighted in the traditional medical establishment, and it's not being supported at a really high level, in our societies and in traditional healthcare. And so for a lot of those reasons, people are just not aware and educated about the risks of breast implant illness, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah, so how did this trend start? When did people start suspecting that the materials inside their body, maybe tissue rejection, thoracic outlet syndrome for sure,
I know
postural issues, et
I
cetera.
know you talk about that. Yeah, so I would kind of put it into two categories. So I know you talk about thoracic outlet syndrome and postural and all of that. That's kind of more biomechanical in my opinion. Obviously the implants are having a biomechanical effect on the body, on the muscles, on the musculoskeletal system that can lead to localized pain and discomfort and all these kinds of subsequent problems. Breast implant illness, in my opinion, is much more about the systemic inflammation that the body generates based on this foreign invader, the implant in the body. So this goes back to your question to, really the 90s. I don't know if you remember, there was a whole big media blitz in the early 90s, and the implants, the saline implants were actually put on the silicone implants were put on a moratorium in 92 for 16 years. And they were doing research to make sure that these implants were safe. This was after a high-profile person came out and said that she got sick from her implants.
Who was that, by the way?
Connie Chung. She was a media personality.
Oh, yeah. I remember Connie Chung. She was a hot Asian chick that was on the nightly news.
Well, as the story goes, she kind of started the brush fire that ended in this kind of moratorium. So silicone implants were off the market for 16 years. And a lot of these studies, when you actually go back and look at, what's been published on breast implant illness and the effects of breast implants, which I've done, obviously I'm in this space now. I'm very passionate about it. So I've done my homework. I've done the research. I know what's been published, what the scientific literature shows. And people want to pretend like there's not evidence out there. And it's like, what about these hundreds of studies of hundreds of thousands of patients over the last 3 to 4 decades? People like my advocate in Rockford has been in this space since the 90s. She was actually on the Oprah Winfrey Show as a audience member. And there's an interesting dialogue with her and the former CEO of Dow Corning going back and forth. So she was talking about breast implant illness back in the 90s because she got BII and was explanted and recovered. And so she's been on this mission for over 30 years. I mean, this was back with like fax machines and like yellow pages. This is before social media and internet. And, it just never really got sufficient traction to become a legitimate medical diagnosis and have an appropriate informed consent process even to get the implants. And so that's really what my goal is, in talking with you and, spreading awareness about BII. It's just really disheartening that, these women are continuing to get implants, and I know that implants have the potential to make women sick. And nobody's talking, I shouldn't say nobody, but there's still a lot of surgeons and a lot of people in healthcare that totally dismiss breast implant illness as being fake or not scientifically validated. And there's some nuances about the technical explantation we can talk about and what the science shows and how these things are supposed to be done if you really want to do it in a scientifically validated way. But the fact that breast implant illness is real should no longer be a question. It's not a myth. It's a legitimate medical scientific diagnosis. This is well studied, and patients need to be aware of that. It's a potential risk before they undergo breast augmentation. I am not anti-implant, but I am about informed consent for the patient so that, number one, they can make the decision. That doesn't really sound like something I want to do right now. And we were just talking to the creative director here. I mean, we can talk about her story, but she knew nothing about breast implant illness when she got her implants almost 10 years ago. She was high risk to begin with. She had underlying health issues, autoimmune conditions, probably not an ideal candidate for breast implants to begin with. She's already had a thyroidectomy at a very young age. So now, that's a factor in ongoing health issues. And we need to be transparent with our patients about getting breast implants because, they might not get symptoms right away. This is the biggest issue is they come in to see their physician. They're like, oh yeah, no problem. And this is the same with her. Get the implants, you're great, you recover. But then it's not until months, years, sometimes decades down the road, and we can talk about why that is, that patients don't develop symptoms. And by that time, they don't temporarily associate the surgery and the breast augmentation with their symptoms. And now they get sucked up into the traditional healthcare system with, physicians and imaging studies and diagnosis and lab work. And all of a sudden they're being treated for some chronic inflammatory condition and not getting any better. And, we can talk about that. I've had a similar experience, but, this is what ends up happening.
Yeah, please feel free to elaborate and go deep. I think it warrants everyone's attention.
Yeah, well, this is what happens. I mean, the
gaslighting, this is what I don't like, is the gaslighting, whether it's in the medical industry or politics, which, corporations and government, they seem to be all one these days. It's, the religion of the almighty fake magical dollar paper bill Federal Reserve situation. But the fact of the matter is people are chasing money and profits and greed. And it's not all that, but there is a huge component. So, and I don't like the gaslighting.
It's terrible. And I went into medicine for all the right reasons, like a lot of physicians do, and always wanted to do the right thing by the patient. And I think by and large, most plastic surgeons still are, like I said, ethical and wanting to make the right decisions by their patients. But just the misinformation that we're trained, that we get from our leaders and our industry and our societies just doesn't support, really the appropriate disclosures with breast implant illness. So these patients, unfortunately, get implants, and they're in this healthcare system, which, as I'm sure is just, not a very enjoyable place to be. They're labeled as having some kind of systemic inflammatory diagnosis that doesn't have any great treatment other than long-term, medical treatment and drugs and, those types of things. Effects. Nobody talks about, holistic nature-based treatments, which, really we should be talking about as far as how to help detox from, breast implant illness and other inflammatory conditions. But they go on for years and decades, and they don't get any better until now. What's happening with social media and with mainstream media now, we just had an article published in Apple News about what we're doing with breast implant illness. So it is starting to make its way into the mainstream, and, resources like you and others that are talking about this on their platforms is really helpful for women to, understand what's really going on behind the scenes. But, patients have been gaslit, like you said, by their physicians, I think, generally unintentionally, that, they're fine. It's not their implants. They're told, you've got, you're perimenopausal. That's usually the age where this typically starts. Sometimes we hear, it's from being vaccinated, or it's from having COVID, or you have long COVID. That was kind of similar to my situation. Or you've got mold exposures, or you got chronic fatigue syndrome. All of these types of inflammatory conditions that, like I said, there's not really like a great medical cure, unless you really go down the rabbit hole of these other types of detoxing protocols that you can try. But, patients come in, they finally hear about breast implant illness on social media. Facebook is actually probably the primary platform where patients are learning about breast implant illness, and there's lots of groups of women talking about it and helping each other, which is great to see. I mean, back when my advocate Laura was going through this, I mean, there was no way to connect the dots. And now the women are able to do that. So, they're coming in and saying, I don't feel well. This is what we hear all the time. I don't feel well. I was told 10 years ago, it's not my implants. I asked my doctor, I went back to my surgeon. They said, don't worry about it. It's not your implants. You're probably just depressed, or you've got marital issues, or you're perimenopausal.
Oh, that's deep gaslighting.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we hear. This is why the patients in general are already so mistrustful of the establishment, their healthcare provider. It kind of puts us on ends with the patients because they're already coming in skeptical of the recommendations that we're going to make as physicians because they've been in the system long enough. They don't have a trusting relationship with their physician, certainly not with their plastic surgeon that put their implants in to begin with, is now telling them, don't worry about it, you're fine, go away, take some medication. So it's a real problem in healthcare.
So let's go back to the psychology. So in the 90s, we're talking about the 90s, and a lot of women did not admit that they had them. Now it's a little bit more of a badge of honor, and I think people are a little bit more honest with breast implants to a certain degree. I see it in the yoga community. No, I don't. And so, but let's unpack the psychology of. You talked about mating. You talked about attracting a certain mate. Is it that we're getting married older because of the career basis? Feminism came up in 73. My mother didn't start working until 1979. I talk a lot about this, and I do believe there's some communism and divide and conquer elements that have come into our society to push women into the marketplace. So can you talk a little bit about the psychology of why women actually get them? I've heard everything from trying to impress either maybe their father, or they're in a bodybuilding competition and their coach wants them to get them. And then I've also heard that they compete with other women. Can you unpack the psychology of why?
Sure, I can try. I'm certainly not inside a woman's head, but we do kind of hear and kind of are able to deduce why women are wanting to get breast implants. So I think there's definitely an element of what you said. I've heard that from fitness models specifically that feel like they could perform better if they had breast implants because they've lost points on their performance because they don't have the right proportions, or I don't know how fitness models are judged for their performance, but I mean I've heard that many times that they need to get breast implants so they can perform better. But I think probably for most women it's just about feeling more attractive. I think, and we just heard this from your producer, she grew up insecure. She was very self-conscious about the appearance of her breasts. I think in her case, they were just small, but sometimes there's, breast asymmetry or women that are just insecure about, the appearance of their breast for whatever reason. And, the mainstream media portrays that if you get breast implants, just like, anything else in this society, that's going to solve all your problems, right? Like all of a sudden you're going to get the job that you want or the mate that you want, and your life is going to take on this whole new direction because you get breast implants. So
instead of the reality, which we're seeing the sickness and there's challenges. And
yeah, absolutely. And that's on the physical side. I mean, I think psychologically though, and this is true for plastic surgery in general. I mean, we as plastic surgeons go into plastic surgery because we want to help people feel better about themselves. And I think there's value in that. I think, I'm not saying in any way, because I do aesthetic plastic surgery, that helping somebody feel better about their appearance is in any way unethical or inappropriate, because I think there is value in having people, look better, and from their perspective, makes them feel better about themselves, and maybe that allows them to, have more productive relationships and perform better in the workplace and just be a more productive member of society. But I think the mistake is thinking that in and of itself is going to somehow transform your life. And as doing something like that, while I think it can be helpful, is not going to change your perspective about your self-confidence, unless you do the inner work at the same time. This was actually studied in the 50s by a plastic surgeon by the name of Malcolm Maltz. I'm not sure if you ever heard of him. And he wrote a book called Psychocybernetics. And,
yeah.
It's an interesting book. And basically what he showed in his book and what he talks about, and this has been replicated many times since then, is, people, he actually focused on rhinoplasty surgery. And what he basically showed is if people don't change the self-image,
Nose jobs.
yeah, the nose jobs. If they don't change the self-image, they always carry that same unattractive self-image, even if the objective outcome of the surgery is good. You know, they don't actually do the inner work that's necessary to kind of clean up whatever baggage, mental, emotional baggage they have in their life, so they can actually enjoy the result that they were striving to achieve by getting the surgery to begin with. So, you know, as a plastic surgeon, it's really hard to kind of go that deep with the patients as far as like, you know, what's the underlying root cause of, you know, what you're trying to accomplish by getting the implants. But I will say, having been through this explant journey now myself, I am much more mindful about making sure that patients are not only getting the surgery for the right reasons, but we're also talking about other aspects of their life, like I said, emotional, mental health, so that, you know, when we do a surgery that's going to objectively make them look better, they also feel more confident because they've, you know, put the time in to do the work on themselves. And, you know, it's not that easy. I've been through it myself. I'm sure you have. We all have, you know, mental, emotional baggage from childhood and, you know, all of these limiting.
Well, the same can be said about money.
Money,
People
car,
think
fancy car, fancy house. It's all the same shit, you know, plastic surgery. And it's like, it's great that money's a tool. You can use that to, you know, do good things. But
the fancy car, it doesn't bring happiness.
It doesn't bring happiness. And, you know, unless you're willing to put the work in, and it's not, you know, just like going to the gym one day. I mean, it's consistency, it's discipline, it's mindfulness. It's, you know, a lot that actually has to change in your life to really notice the improvement. And I know you're into all of those types of treatments. That's actually one of the ways that I find my way to your work is, interestingly, like I said, I had some of my own health issues. I kind of went down that road myself with all these more natural, nature-based approaches. And then I came across your work and I was like, wow, like talking about patients with breast implant illness. So it's helpful for me because I'm into all of these types of, you know, nature-based approaches, spirituality, these things that I think just generally help people live a more fulfilling life. But it's also really helpful for all of these patients that are also suffering. I mean, it's not like and I think it's important to differentiate. I think a lot of people get this wrong, like breast implant illness, like you got breast implants, now you got breast implant illness. And I've talked with experts all over the world. Like I said, I've done all of the scientific literature. I understand. I have a really good idea about what's causing breast implant illness, the incidence of, you know, it in certain types of patients, who's at risk, you know, why they get it, when they get it. And ultimately, you know, in my opinion, breast implant illness is just like one more thing. You know, people are leading these toxic lifestyles.
Right.
You know, talk about, you know, you're getting toxic food, toxic information, toxic water, you know, no movement. I mean, go back to your 9 pillars of health. Like, clean all that stuff up, and we'll see if you still are symptomatic from your breast implants. I don't think it's like one thing that causes breast implant illness. I think it's breast implant illness is one more contributing factor in underlying systemic inflammation in our body. And, you know, we're at a time now where we're bombarded with toxins in the environment, toxins in our information, toxic social media, and all of these things play a role in creating inflammation in the body. We could talk about all the research about genetics and epigenetics and microbiome and how all that factors into creating inflammation in the body and compromising the immune system. But it all works hand in hand, and the implants are just kind of fuel on the fire. So you already have you're set up already for a forest fire, right? You got all this, you know, dry wood, so to speak. You throw the implants on, and that's why we're seeing this explosion of breast implant illness now. It's not only just the implants, but it's everything else that's in our environment. I don't know if you've seen the documentary Toxic Nation yet. I just watched that from Maha Films. And they kind of explore all of the, you know, a lot of the questions you're asking, kind of the history about some of these toxins in our environment. Why do they exist? Why are we not talking about them? You know, the glyphosates and the seed oils and the fluoride and the ultra-processed food. And it's all kind of the same part of the underlying root cause.
Yes, and I have a question later on. We can go even a little bit deeper on that. But I just want to let everybody know that's watching out there that I like small boobs. Right?
And natural. I've heard you say that many times.
And natural, too.
And I will say,
love them, by the way.
I will give you credit because, Troy, you did a couple podcasts with women that had explanted following a journey with breast implant illness. And I watched your videos, and those are like 5 and 7 years ago. And this was like way before anybody was talking about BII. So,
Yes.
you were definitely ahead of the curve on that one.
Yes, anything that has to do with mental, emotional, physical health, and I don't want to see people suffer unnecessarily. And since I was a young man, I've always noticed that they just look unnatural. They look like there's something in there that's either pulling them down, or the psychology of why I put them there in the first place. There's just an energy. And when I started talking I admired a woman. I was studying with Paul Chek, and there was a beautiful woman, and I think she was a bodybuilder at one point as well. And aesthetically, she looked amazing, and she had nice clothes, and she was very pretty. And but I noticed the breast implants, and later on she got into shamanism, and this is one of the women that I interviewed.
One of the ones on your podcast. I saw it.
Patty, a beautiful woman, and but I saw that when I first saw her in Paul Chek's class, and I just saw the big, the breasts, and later on we became great friends, and she really got into shamanism and started doing lots of deep spiritual work, and she had them removed, and you can find that on my YouTube channel, and I think it warrants our attention, because I think women think their lives are going to get better, and there's a potential for them to actually get worse. And then again, I'm out there searching the internet. I like small breasts, it's like there's a guy out there, and I know I'm not alone, right? There's guys out there that appreciate the natural beauty of a woman, period, right? And the older I get, the more I realize that aesthetics are important biologically. They do attract us for our mates, and to procreate is prime directive. And I believe, all that is in there, and our hormones are active at a young age. And I think we have more energy when we're younger. Now we're pushing that to later. Women are having children in 35, 40, and that really drags them down. And the environment, as you were talking about, affects them, and they get thyroiditis or Hashimoto's, and then they get on those drugs, and then the menopause. It's like, it's nuts out there.
It's really unfortunate. It really is. And I mean, literally, I've been paying attention now, like just traveling and coming here and like looking around the airplane and the airport, and I like literally feel so bad for these people. I'm watching them consume toxic food, sit there scrolling on social media, like addicted to their phone, all that toxic information coming in, not moving. I mean, and it's not like hard to, put the processes in place. I did it. I was leading a toxic lifestyle. I had my own health crisis about a year and a half ago, and it takes intention. It takes, a lot of discipline and thoughtfulness and time, frankly, to, put together a lifestyle that's going to lead to positive health outcomes. But, what's the alternative? You just get sicker and sicker and sicker, and then
Pain.
you're a customer for life, so to speak. So I heard somebody say, I'm not looking to add years to my life, but I want to add life to my years, and that's really kind of where I'm coming from. It's like, who really cares about longevity if you're miserable and you're unhappy and you're stressed out and you feel like shit? I mean, we really want to help people improve their quality of life. That was what really attracted me to plastic surgery to begin with. For me, it wasn't about curing cancer. I could have been a neurosurgeon or an oncologic surgeon or one of these other specialties. But what really resonated with me was helping people feel better about themselves and improving their quality of life, and being able to do a surgery and having somebody feel better and happier about their existence, and able to engage and interact with people in a more confident way. And I had confidence issues growing up, and I've had to overcome a lot of those. But, like I said, you got to put the work in to do it, because doing surgery by itself, without kind of the context of just working on yourself, is not going to, in and of itself, make that change in your life.
So, doctor, can you talk a little bit about that, the confidence growing up? You became a doctor, you're a good-looking guy. Talk about that, because I think that's important for the viewers to understand psychology in general, but please share.
Yeah, sure. I'm short, And there's a whole, probably episode we could do on that. I was on stimulatory drugs because I thought I had ADHD. So I was on like these medications when I was going through my growth spurt, which probably contributed to, short stature. And so that was always something that I wasn't very confident about. And so having been through the medical infrastructure and having been on the medications for ADHD, and then, growing up with somebody with short stature, this is something that I had to work on, a lot in my 20s and 30s to just kind of overcome that height dysphoria is really kind of the name for it, where it really affects you. And so I can sympathize and understand where people have confidence issues. And there's not like an easy fix. You got to put the work in. There's no magic pill. There's no magic surgery that you can do to feel better about yourself. But, it takes a lot of introspection, a lot of, like I said, mindfulness. And, the beauty of it nowadays, for as bad as a lot of these technologies are for the neurochemicals and the addictions that go along with, the social media, there's like unlimited resources of information on the internet, on YouTube, ChatGPT. And I mean, if you want to put the time in, you don't need to go to therapy. I mean, you can do the work yourself, and, pretty much anything you want to learn about, you can do in your own spare time and understand, what the root cause is of why you feel a certain way. I mean, you could trauma chase this all the way back to childhood if you really want to kind of get that deep. But I mean, I guess my point is we all grow up with certain traumas and insecurities and, upbringings. And that contributes to how we perceive ourselves and how we interact with other people, professionally, personally, relationships. And so, I think it's important for all of us to look in the mirror and say, am I being the best version of myself? And if I'm not, what can I do to, objectively, practically improve that? Do I need to find a coach? Do I need to go through some kind of therapy? Do I need to, maybe use medications as a tool? I'm not anti-medication either. I think it's got a role, but, maybe, like you said, be intentional about it, be mindful about it. Like, am I going to use, whether it's, plant medicines or traditional pharmacologic medicines, am I going to use it as a tool? So there's lots of things that I think we can be doing to help not only feel better internally, but then obviously portray yourself as the best version as yourself to people in your community, because that only raises everybody else up too.
Well, you're healthy again. Your skin, your hair, you look good. You look great. I know you went through a little bit of a healing crisis. What was the main catalyst to help you with your confidence, and where are you at with that today?
I feel great today. I think physically, I had a setback about a year and a half ago. Interestingly, I kind of relate this to patients with breast implant illness because I had all of the same symptoms. And so I'll start with that because that was your first question. Like, what are the symptoms of breast implant illness? I don't think we've even really covered that yet. So it's a lot of these nonspecific inflammatory symptoms. For me, it was like brain fog, fatigue, insomnia, a lot of cognitive symptoms. Patients also experience anxiety, depression, rashes, joint pain, typically weight gain or loss, full spectrum of all these kind of nonspecific inflammatory symptoms. I think I mentioned, rashes. And what ends up happening is I had a specific situation where, and you probably know Pampa, he talks about all this stuff. I've been through his program. That was like one of the first resources I found when I was going through my own health crisis. But he talks about the kind of perfect storm of events. And I think, BII is no different. So he talks about physical, chemical, emotional stressors. And so, in retrospect, I had a lot of these going on. I had a tick exposure. I was being treated for, prophylaxis for Lyme disease. I was on high dose antibiotics at the same time. I also, at the same time, found out I had mercury toxicity. I had mold toxicity. Possibly, Lyme disease, but definitely anaplasmosis, possibly long COVID. I mean, it's the same stuff that, stress. I had my dad was in the hospital at the same time. I had, stressors at work. So it's, this kind of perfect storm of events where, somebody like me, your body just kind of gets to the point where it's like, okay, like we're going to start expressing symptoms because, we've kind of maxed out our ability to detoxify all of these physical, chemical, and emotional stressors in your life. So that was kind of my starting point last May of 2024. And, I've kind of went through the traditional healthcare route. And like I said, just didn't get a lot of great information or resources to help me. So I fortunately have like the knowledge and resources, to take information from the internet and
get results
and integrate it into my knowledge base and the financial resources, because this stuff isn't cheap either to, do a lot of these treatments and I was already into a lot of the, more holistic biohack types of stuff. So, I did everything that a lot of our BII patients do. And so that really helped me identify with what they have been going through and made me realize that like there's just like so much opportunity to help these patients because no other than like the advocates that are in this space, like there's nobody out there helping these patients. Like there's no physicians like me or very few of us that are actually talking about what's really going on and trying to help patients, live their most productive life. So that was really what, kind of catalyzed me into, really wanting to focus on this space, as one of the pillars of health, and we've talked about this, having a legacy and, what could I do in my own life that is going to be bigger than me, that is really going to be about providing service to others with my knowledge base, my skill set, my resources, my technical skills. How can I use that for the betterment of humanity, essentially? And so I decided, this has got to be the path that I'm going to go down and advocate for women with breast implant illness. And, that's kind of where we are today.
Well, I mean, you kind of answered this question, but it says you've become a global go-to expert on breast implant illness. Was there a specific moment or patient story that made you realize how big this issue truly is? And what I'm realizing is you went through something very similar yourself.
I went through something similar and I recovered. I'm fully recovered, and I still...
You look great.
Thank you.
I mean, I look at people's skin and eyes and hair, and not everybody's people are looking pretty dull. And that's just on the asymptomatic spectrum. I'm not talking about the severely obese or very sick people.
Yeah, I had to clean up a lot of things, stress, thinking patterns, food, water, nature, connection, legacy, movement, breath, thought. It's all the basics, right? This is what you talk about. That's why your program really resonated with me. I'm like, we don't have to overcomplicate it.
We're looking for something that's new under the sun, and there's nothing new under the sun.
Sunlight, speaking of under the sun, yeah. I've always been a big fan, but now that, there's science to support the benefits of sun exposure, I'm like, I'm all in.
Have you read Clint Ober's work on inflammation and grounding? And he got
grounding's another big one, but I haven't read his work. No.
Yeah, Clint Ober is the grounding guy, and they've actually included me as of yesterday. They just interviewed me for his new book coming out, and what he did was he tried to get all the labs in UCLA. Nobody would look at grounding, and finally he found the sleep lab, and they were willing to look at it. They only needed one scientist to look at it, and the lowering of inflammation in the lower extremities, and it's all in his book, Earthing. It's called Earthing.
That's another one that, as you kind of go down that rabbit hole and ask the right questions and read the right information. I haven't read that work specifically, but it's like people dismiss earthing or grounding as like some kind of metaphysical, mystical, like nonsense. And it's like, have you tried it? Have you looked at the research? Have you felt the difference? Like there's a lot to unpack there, but guess what?
I have. I don't need the research.
Nobody's making money on touching a tree, so it's like, where there's no incentive to really integrate that into our healthcare system.
Man, I'm in a studio right now, and I want to look a certain way, but as soon as I get home, the shoes come off, the clothes come off, the foot prisons. Okay, so let's keep unpacking this. Are breast implants just another form of psychological warfare against women's natural bodies? And how deep does this program run? And, we're also looking at transhumanism. It's written in Agenda 21, the World Economic Forum documents. And what's that? What's his name? The guy that wrote the book, was it Sapiens? He writes about that, and Homo Deus. as well, talking, and then Elon Musk has the Neuralink, the chip they want to put in people's brains. So, is this where does this come on the horizon of the psychological warfare, the gaslighting, the double speak, and also getting away from nature and having injections, etc., and kind of this globalist transhumanism agenda?
Yeah, that's a deep question. I'm not sure I've got all those answers. I probably need to do a little bit more reading. I mean, I can speak from a medical scientific perspective on a lot of things, but getting into transhumanism and AI and energy medicine and all of the things that are kind of peripheral to what we're talking about, I'm certainly no expert in any of that, but I do think that I would like to believe that what's happening with women with their breast implants and in healthcare in general is not
just a mistake.
It's not intentional.
Okay.
Yes, I would like to believe that. Now, I mean, I've come across a lot of things in my experience and in my life that would make me second guess that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would still like to believe that, like I said, most of the physicians and surgeons out there want to do the right thing by the patient.
I agree. The majority of people that get into medicine want to help. But I agree. And I also have studied enough psychology to understand that about 6% of the population has the propensity to be a psychopath. And they probably find their ways to either politics or, corporate structures. So, yeah, were you going to finish a thought?
Well, yeah, I don't think I have a whole lot more to add on that point because I just don't know that much about it. I think that the trend right now is for people, like you said, to get more and more cosmetic surgery done to feel whole. Mm-hmm. So that means that they're coming from a place of lack, mm-hmm. right? So people, for whatever reason, don't feel like they're enough, and that drives them to get aesthetic surgery. So I think on the physician side, it's important that we, connect with the patients and really understand what it is they're trying to achieve by mm-hmm. getting that surgery, and then help them through that journey to understand that, this surgery in and of itself is not going to probably make the change in their life that they want. Mm-hmm. And you know what, these patients, if you tell them that, they're probably going to go to somebody else.
Right. I understand that.
Yeah, they'd probably be like, okay, well, I didn't want to come here and have a psychological diagnosis. I just want to get breast implants or tummy tuck or whatever it is. So that's fine. I'll just go somebody that's just going to do the surgery and not ask too many questions. But, it kind of goes back to what I said before, which is I think part of spreading awareness about breast implant illness should also be talking about the perception of, what makes us happy and whole, and, stop focusing on lack and vanity and things that are, so self-serving that we kind of lose sight of what's really important and providing contribution and service to others. Mm-hmm. Actually, Josh Axe, who's he's a YouTuber.
Love him.
I was really impressed by him, actually. He did a YouTube video about a year ago on breast implant illness. And I know he's not an explant surgeon, but he actually talks about this in the last 6 minutes of his video, all about, and he sounds like he comes from like a kind of Christianity kind mm-hmm. of background, spiritual background, and people are so focused on appearance on social media and comparing themselves and, causing a lot of people to be unhappy mm-hmm. Day in and day out. And I mean, you see how unhappy people are. Mm-hmm. And he makes the point, focus on people that are doing things to contribute to the improvement of humanity, that are mm-hmm. providing service, because that's going to be where you end up finding wholeness, not mm-hmm. in getting bigger breasts or, getting some kind of surgery done that you think is going to miraculously change your life. It's kind of like, keeping up with the Kardashians, but mm-hmm. with plastic surgery, to your other question about, is one surgery ever enough?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm here to remind everyone out there that they are a child of God, that they have incredible gifts. Living a natural lifestyle is going to put your aesthetics in a more beautiful place. What's the measurement of beauty? Is symmetry. And so living a natural lifestyle aligned with the natural principles, and then gratitude and forgiveness, gratitude for what we have, forgiveness for what was or who treated us wrong. These basic fundamental tenets will get us back to more wholeness and understanding that we are enough, and that lots of times, doctor, people are coming to you looking for a miracle or looking for to change something or a pill or and the fact of the matter is they're looking for a miracle. They're walking around in one.
Right.
And so fine tune, the vehicle we've been given, and comparison is the thief of joy. I mean, let's face it, we're all unique, and I'm sure I was in the fashion industry,
right?
And boy, oh boy, am I not tall enough, right? I'm 5'10" and a half.
Well, you make up for it with your good looks.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't give a shit. You know what I'm saying? It's
Right.
like that's their metric,
Right.
And it's like I'm friggin' amazing, and it's taken me.
That's literally what Josh Ack said. He's like, where are your strengths? Are you a great friend? Are you a great mother? Are you a great, whatever, coworker? Like that's what you should be focusing on, not necessarily just having bigger breasts because you think that's going to complete you.
I mean, look, I'm a very high-strung, aggressive, masculine human being. I need the opposite around me. I need, I don't care how tall my friend is or how short they are or this, that, or the other thing. If they can calm my nervous system, I'm like, that's gold. Everyone's unique. Everyone has their gifts. People would judge my girlfriends or this or that. My kids now are in, my daughter's in ballet and figure skating. And there's a whole bunch of just like, I'm not letting her go to New York and get Russians to throw chairs at her because she doesn't get on point good enough or something. I'm not playing that game.
Right.
Same thing with the modeling industry. I saw it with the women. It was terrible. The amount of bulimia and anorexia that it would create. Well, and drug addiction. I mean, let's face it. And then years later, all of the sexual stuff, obviously, we're coming out with the Diddy parties and the Epstein list. I mean, this was going on. A lot of the people that was implicated in Epstein's list. There's a guy named Jean-Luc. He was a model scout for Models One, and I had a lot of friends over in Models One, and I saw all the young girls come to Europe to go play with the European playboys and stuff like that. And so, this is a lot of this is just dirty business, and I think if people just get back to really understanding that we are a gift from God, that life on earth is a gift, and there are some natural elements, I think that everyone would heal their psychological issues.
Yeah, and I will say that probably, because I actually had somebody ask me this question not too long ago, like what was the single biggest thing that you did that helped with your healing? And I would say finding spirituality. Mm-hmm. That was kind of the foundation for me. And, everything else kind of came downstream from there.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's this. We come from spiritual energy, which is attached to the emotional body, and then that coagulates into the mental body, and then we are all mind, the physical body, and so that makes sense. So if you want to reverse it, where the rubber meets the road, you're going to get the most, I think, mileage is the spiritual work. That's hard to sell to the public,
right?
Because spirituality is also couched in religion, and that can be a danger zone for a lot of people. So I don't lead with the spirituality. Yeah. However, if you can sit a 10-day Vipassana course and go sit with yourself in silence for 10 days, I think you're going to find some miracles there. But wherever you find it, it really doesn't matter. Whether you go to the Amazon and drink ayahuasca, or you work with the Maori healers, or you just simply go into the woods and find yourself.
I would say that, as it relates to BII and just health in general, it works both top down and bottom up. So, I kind of went from top-down spirituality to physical health. I think you can also do the reverse where, you dial in your body, your physical health, and that's going to help your mental health. I mean, this is a unified system, mind, body, right? So I don't think it necessarily matters how you come at it, but I think, both have to be in balance.
Yeah, there's no separation. And ultimately, if you want to be a more developed human being, then it's integration and embodiment of all of ideas in all systems. People want to know, like, hey, how do I boost my testosterone?
Right.
Well, there's no isolated hormones. So how's your sleep? How's your nutrition? And so, because insulin is a hormone, and it's like your blood sugar is very important to your nutrition, et cetera. So So people are always trying to separate this thing. And I think this comes from Newtonian, Cartesian,
Absolutely.
mechanistic physics.
Yeah, that's kind of the old science. I mean, nobody's even applying all of the new metaphysical, epigenetic, scientific data, quantum biomechanics into what we're doing in traditional healthcare, and that's like a whole, kind of separate rabbit hole we could go down. But I totally agree.
And we're outsourcing our consciousness to AI. I mean, the big, I think, unified field theory that we're working towards is integrating everything and knowing that the human being has the capabilities of the supercomputer. I mean, that's my philosophy and some of the indigenous elders that I've studied with. I want to make sure that we cover and define for everyone out in cyberspace for the short form content. And so can you define breast implant illness symptomology and just
Sure.
go through that a little bit more?
So breast implant illness is a diagnosis of exclusion. So basically what that means is, there's not like a diagnostic test that we can specifically do if somebody comes in and says, I've got these symptoms, and we say, okay, here's the blood test, or here's the specific testing that we're going to do, the radiographic imaging or MRI or whatever, that's going to define whether you have BII. So there's nothing like that we can do. So that's why it's a diagnosis of exclusion. And even as a diagnosis of exclusion, there's kind of a nuance to explain there. But, generally speaking, people that come in that don't have a explainable reason for their symptoms, and those symptoms are typically, like I said, a constellation of nonspecific inflammatory conditions that typically developed after having gotten implants. So there's got to be the implants to make it breast implant illness. Otherwise, you're going to be diagnosed with something else. And it could be immediately after getting implants, or it could be, years or decades down the road.
And the symptomology associated with headaches, the inflammatory?
So inflammation in the body can manifest in lots of different ways, depending on the individual's, kind of genetic makeup, immunologic sensitivity, lifestyle factors like we've talked about, specific types of implants, technical considerations and how the implants are put in. So I don't think it's one size fits all, which makes it very confusing for people to try to put BII in a box, because it's not one thing. Like I said, like you got breast implants, now you got BII. Everybody's very different. It's like if I were to do a surgery on you, you might have a very nice, linear, well-healed scar. Somebody else may develop a keloid. Why is that? I could do the exact same surgery on two different people because we got different susceptibilities. If I do a certain medical treatment, I might have one response where somebody else, based on their genetic makeup and other, it's called bioaccumulation of toxins over time, somebody might have a completely different response. So it's these symptoms, nonspecific. A lot of times it's cognitive. So, that would be symptoms like headaches, brain fog, insomnia, fatigue. Another big one for me personally, and we see in our patients, is post-exertional malaise. So you get really tired after exercise, which is also a big marker for chronic fatigue syndrome, which is why they get put in that category many times. Body aches, joint pain, rashes. Like I said, weight fluctuations. Usually it involves, weight gain, hair thinning, hair loss, dry eyes. A lot of these patients get diagnosed with autoimmune conditions. They've been diagnosed with Sjogren's syndrome, which is, dryness in the mucous membrane. Some people get diagnosed with lupus because of the rashes and immunologic titers that they develop in their blood work. And again, in my opinion, that doesn't mean that they have lupus. I think they've got immunologic sensitivity to what's happening in their body, and now their bodies are creating these autoantibodies that are giving the perception of the diagnosis of one of these autoimmune conditions. However, unlike somebody that doesn't have breast implants and has an autoimmune condition, patients generally, if they have breast implant illness and they come in with a new onset autoimmune condition or these inflammatory symptoms, you take the implants out, and this is well studied, well documented. Like I said, there's some technical nuances about how these implants should be taken out, but taking that aside, up to like 98% of women get better after removing their implants, it's amazing.
That was my subsequent question. Yeah. So what are the results?
And it sounds women like literally come in the day after surgery, and they're like, well, the first thing they all say, and I would say 100% of women, and there's been studies on this, the biomechanical effect. And you got this big implant on the chest, scar tissue, they can finally breathe. They don't have this heaviness. They don't have the neck pain. They don't have the back pain. They don't have the tightness in the chest. That's a big one right away. I don't personally categorize that as breast implant illness. I think that's more of like just a biomechanical effect of the implants. The implants usually are under the muscle. The muscles are being strained, and it causes these imbalances in the body. But even symptoms that patients have after surgery, usually the brain fog's the biggest. And we'll actually see improvement in like the clarity of their eyes. I mean, patients will self-report that like my family member, my spouse, my kids are like, wow, your eyes look really clear. And we've got photos to demonstrate that. Right in recovery, patients will say like, I know I'm waking up from surgery and I'm under the influence of anesthesia and I'm in pain, but I feel different. I feel more clear. I feel like a weight's been lifted, not only off my chest, but my brain is clear. And then those symptoms continue to get better very quickly in most patients. Within days or weeks after surgery, they start coming in. I usually see them the day after surgery, then usually at like 2 weeks to get drains out, 1 month. And it's very progressive. And it usually is within, I would say, the first month or two after surgery, patients are like, I feel like back to myself again. I just did a explant on a very nice patient down in Palm Beach. And, to one of your questions, she's an Army veteran. She's like a fitness instructor. She's into yoga, perfectly healthy, young, beautiful woman, got breast implants, couldn't do anything, completely incapacitated. Took her implants out. I just did her 2-month follow-up last week. 100% of her symptoms are gone, 100%.
Wow.
Best she's ever felt. She wants to start training for a marathon. She's back to activity unrestricted. I mean, and it's literally like, we do a 2-hour surgery. Where else can you find that amount of improvement? Somebody with a chronic debilitating condition that they think that they're going to have to compromise their lifestyle. And some of these patients are suicidal. These people that have had these implants in for a long time and have been sick and, are disabled. They can't work. They struggle with personal relationships. It becomes a whole identity for them. And they actually become psychologically suicidal from the effects of BII. And you take the implants out and they completely recover. Most patients.
Right. Wow. So that sounds miraculous.
It really is. It is miraculous. And that's, why I and a lot of other advocates, I would consider myself like a surgeon advocate. A lot of other surgeon advocates in the space have, continued to invest in doing more and more BII surgery, despite the controversy, because we see the results. You can't argue with the results. These patients came in, they were sick, they had breast implants, they got their implants out, and they got better. So, I mean, you do the math.
Well, I see this as a huge service to humanity. I mean,
that's how I see it. I mean, and you know how many women...
Because you're being honest in a time when people are not being so honest.
How many women in the world have breast implants? 35 million.
35 million.
Can you imagine the impact, if we were just transparent about breast implant illness and let's say we removed implants on 35 million women, the effect that would have on the collective consciousness of humanity? I mean, it would be a life changer.
The human psyche would be freed up just from...
just from breast implants. 3.5 million in the U.S. alone.
3.5 million breast implants in the United States?
Patients with breast implants, yeah.
Patients with breast implants.
So I guess that probably means 7 million actual breast implants. Unless you are a cancer patient that you got an implant on one side, but usually it's on both.
Okay.
But that's a whole nother paradox where patients have breast cancer, they have treatment for breast cancer, sometimes radiation, chemotherapy, breast cancer reconstruction. And what do? We put an implant back in. And the patient's already immunocompromised. They're already got, a number of health-related issues from their cancer or their cancer treatment. And now we're just adding more fuel to the fire. And then they go on to get BII. So it's just really a sad state of affairs.
And is there statistics on like that? Is that a worse situation because they're already immunocompromised?
I would think so. Like, I don't know of any specific studies that have looked at cancer patients in particular. But
are you removing them from cancer patients
see them.
as well?
We see them sometimes. Mm-hmm. That's a subset of patients, and this is a very controversial topic because a lot of patients want the insurance to cover the removal of the implants because they have a medical diagnosis of breast implant illness. There's medical necessity, there's functional need, they're sick. Generally, the insurance companies don't cover it, which they probably should, but in patients that have been previously diagnosed with breast cancer or mastectomy, they will cover it as part of a reconstructive surgery. And so I do think that women that have undergone a breast cancer surgery means they've got an underlying diagnosis. Why do we get cancer? They're probably immunosuppressed to begin with. They've got other lifestyle variables that are contributing to the development of cancer in their body, impaired detox pathways, inflammation causing the cancer to begin with. Now we throw on chemotherapy. Now they're more immunosuppressed. Now we put the implants back in. I mean, it's just a setup for more problems down the road.
And so, for the most part, the surgery is elective and not covered by insurance. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, because from the insurance company's perspective, it's not a legitimate medical diagnosis. This is where some of the, rubber meets the road with, the controversy about breast implant illness. So it's not recognized as a medical diagnosis by the insurance companies, so they don't pay for it. And their perspective would be, well, you paid to get them in. It was an elective surgery to put them in, so we're not going to pay to deal with the complication related to breast augmentation.
So insurance doesn't cover breast implant illness at all?
Generally not. So some insurance companies, and I would say a minority of insurance companies, if you submit a letter of medical necessity and the patient has certain symptoms such as grade 4 capsular contracture, which basically is the equivalent to pain in the breast from a very contracted implant, they will typically reluctantly approve a medically necessary surgery, but it's very nuanced and individualized to the individual patient.
Okay. And I'm here to remind everyone watching my rudimentary understanding. Well, Paul Chek taught me this. We all see braces in children's teeth, and I think it takes like an ounce of pressure to move the teeth over time. And how much do the breast implants typically weigh?
About a pound.
So that's probably where all these structural issues
are and
happening.
Don't forget too, I mean, just putting the implants in, we're moving a lot of tissue around. I mean, you're changing the blood supply, you're disconnecting muscles, you're creating a pocket for the implant, not to mention, potential contamination or biofilm, which is a big topic in the capsular contracture and explant community, which as a potential contributor to this kind of low-grade systemic inflammation. So there's a lot that's happening when you're actually putting the implant in that may contribute to not only musculoskeletal dysfunction after surgery, but all these other symptoms of BII.
And so can you talk a little bit about the biofilms? Is that what you're removing in this process? And what is a biofilm?
So what a biofilm is, and this is implicated, and I would direct anybody. There's a great article that was just published by Schoenfeld in 2023. It was a follow-up article from his original publication in 2011, talking about ASIA, which is called the autoimmune inflammatory condition induced by adjuvants, which is really what we're talking about with BII. He lays it all out in this article. It's also called Schoenfeld syndrome.
And what's an adjuvant definition?
Definition of an adjuvant is a foreign material that's introduced into the body. It could be a breast implant. It could be other things we probably shouldn't talk about on this podcast.
Yep, don't want to get censored.
But, it could be different types of meshes. It could be, prosthesis, other medically approved devices.
Preservatives inside other medically approved
Yeah, but
devices.
any kind of adjuvant that in a genetically susceptible individual causes inflammation in the body.
Okay.
And so it creates this ASIA syndrome. And so going back to, what your question is about biofilms, this is kind of the theory about how this actually contributes to the symptoms. So, there's not like a quote unquote infection, but these implants allow bacteria to live on the surface of the implants because there's no blood supply to the implants. So they get contaminated a lot of times with skin flora, skin bacteria. It's called Propionibacteria acnes. And so it creates this biofilm around the implant, which is enough that, your body can't remove the infection. So it actually, walls it off. It creates this inflammatory response. It forms this capsule around the implant. And so advocates like me that are doing...
You mean the human being is genius?
Yes, exactly. And it doesn't like foreign bodies.
Protect itself?
Yes, that's exactly what the innate intelligence does. It walls off this implant or foreign body, It tries to protect the rest of the body from, the biofilm, which has been demonstrated to cause inflammation, cause capsular contracture. It's a whole kind of spectrum of inflammation from, in my opinion, you go from this biofilm to a capsular contracture, which I think everybody would agree on at this point. But then that can also lead to inflammation like BII. We can talk about ALCL, which is a whole nother medical diagnosis called anaplastic large cell lymphoma, which in my opinion is kind of at the other end of the inflammatory spectrum. After long-standing inflammation, you get these actually cancers that develop in the capsule around the implants. That was why the 410 implants were taken off the market, because they were finding that in these textured implants, patients had a higher likelihood of developing ALCL in the capsule. So, all of this may be biofilm related. I don't think there's any conclusive evidence, but we know that, biofilms are a real thing, whether we're talking about implants or other hidden infections. Like Lyme is another pathogen that's well known to create these biofilms and protect itself from the body's defense mechanism. So they can evade the body's defenses, and it creates chronic inflammation over time. And so that's why people like me advocate for doing a total capsulectomy or en bloc capsulectomy, because that's not only removing the implant, again, probably a topic for another podcast, but we're also taking out all of that inflammatory tissue around the implant, which probably contains heavy metals, probably contains biofilms, definitely is protecting, the body from any ruptured implant, which sometimes can happen, even if it's not picked up ahead of time. And also we're taking out the potential for any of these cancers like ALCL, like squamous cell carcinoma, and other cancers that can actually develop in the capsule around the implant. So most advocates worldwide that I've talked to and interacted with all agree, the right surgery for these patients is to take out the implant, remove the source, but you also have to take out the entire rind or capsule that forms around the implants to maximize chances of the patients recovering after surgery and having their symptoms essentially resolve.
Okay. Awesome. And most people don't spring for that bill. They don't want to get the whole package.
It's not really a cost issue. It's number one, it's controversial in plastic surgery circles. There's been competing literature about whether it's necessary or not. That's one of the reasons I'm going to go talk to Rob Whitfield. He's one of the experts on this in Austin. That's where I'm going from here. And so I think you're going to see a lot more people talking about the science. And he's in the process of publishing like a great book about breast implant illness, and he's going to, I think, blow the lid off of what actually is going on here. And so I'm excited to talk with him about his perspective. He's been involved in these research studies from the beginning. He understands kind of the conflict of interest in a lot of the research without going into a lot of details. But the surgery itself to remove the capsules is technically more challenging, so it requires a surgeon that has the skill set to do it. It takes longer. There's more risks involved. And the aesthetic results aren't as good. It's more deforming to the breast tissue. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of reasons not to do a capsulectomy from the surgeon's perspective. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that it's not as commonly performed. But from a health perspective, from a patient recovery perspective and improving their symptoms, like I said, the surgeon advocates that really understand what's happening all recommend doing the en bloc or total capsulectomy.
Okay, and what is the ballpark pricing for something like this? And does, again, insurance have any play in that whatsoever?
So the insurance piece, generally no. Some patients try to get approval on the back end. Usually that's not successful. Like I said, the exception would be patients that have a history of breast cancer or mastectomy. You may be able to get approval as part of a reconstructive breast surgery. As it relates to, what was your other question? I kind of answered those.
Price,
price, yeah.
Ballpark pricing.
So I kind of break it down into like 3 or 4 different surgeries. So there's kind of the base model, if you want to call it that. That's just the explant. That includes the en bloc capsulectomy. Typically, that also includes the muscle repair, which is important for the ideal aesthetics of the patient. And that kind of base price, I think, is about $9,000 or $10,000. That's pretty consistent across all plastic surgeons in the country, because there's a lot of price transparency online. So I don't know of too many plastic surgeons that are, either gouging patients or undercutting it. We're all kind of in the same ballpark. And then if you want to do more things, and if the patient selection is appropriate, if somebody's got loose skin or they've got ptosis of the breast and they want to, especially after explanting, tighten up the loose skin, you would include a lift at the same time. Not all surgeons do that at the same time, but if you do that, it's more work involved. There's more cost. Usually that cost will go to like $12,000 to do like an explant plus a lift. And then typically like the last layer of, aesthetic reconstruction for patients that want to enhance appearance and volume after removing the implant would be to do what's called like a fat transfer. So now we're borrowing tissue, your own tissue, as a way to add volume to the breast without having to put the implant back in. So some patients also elect to do explant plus lift plus fat transfer, or explant just fat transfer if you don't have a skin laxity issue. And so that probably is like more like in the $12,000 to $14,000 range. So short answer is, I would say ballpark for most explants anywhere you go in the U.S., you're looking at, I would say like $10,000 to $15,000. Yeah. And this is after patients have already paid to be augmented. So
which is typically how much is that?
That could be anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 to get the implants to begin with. So it is there is a lot of cost considerations in doing the explant surgery too. A lot of patients just straight up can't afford it. I might as well make a plug on your podcast. We've started a nonprofit 501c3 for women that can't afford to be explanted. It's the very least I can do. I'm going to donate all my time to help women get explanted. There's not going to be any costs associated with doing that. I think we'll have like a process where we can help women go through the evaluation and consultative journey to make sure that they're appropriate for the charity surgery, but that's in the works, and we hope to be able to have women that are actually able to afford the explant surgery contribute and donate to women's surgery to be explanted that can't otherwise afford it. And so, that was really like philanthropy is very important to me. Is something that I did in my training, and I'd really like to be able to kind of pay that forward and help women that are suffering with breast implant illness, but they literally don't have the money. And a lot of these women can't afford it because they're disabled now. They're out of work. They're disabled. They have got, huge medical expenses related to health-related issues, BII, and they can't afford it. Now they're stuck. They can't get their implants out. So we want to, and unsurprisingly, nobody has actually created a charity for women with BII. So we're in the process of starting the patient selection for that now.
Beautiful. And, message out to all the young women out there. I mean, let's pay attention to this. I mean, you watch the Kardashians, you think your life's going to be better. You're scrolling TikTok dances and, everybody's OnlyFans now too. It's like, okay, but you could be majorly injuring yourself and debilitating yourself in the near future, 10, 20 years from now. So be very mindful if you think you want breast implants, breast augmentation, et cetera. And so if you were rewriting the whole informed consent process for implants, talking about the advocacy or just informed consent, like what are the potential pitfalls of this? What are the potential risks? What would you make sure every woman hears before she goes under the knife?
So there is a black box warning now on implants, and breast implant illness is part of the disclosure process in the informed consent process. If the surgeon follows the black box warning, I think there's still a lot of surgeons that probably are not talking about it with their patients for lots of different reasons. So, like I said, I'm not anti-implant, but I am pro-informed consent. So I think that, women getting implants need to have an honest discussion. To your point, why are they getting the implants? Is this really something that's going to help them feel better about themselves? And even if at that point they're like, okay.
Tell them Troy Casey said, probably not.
Even if you want to get implants.
And he's looking for a new wife. No.
It's like, you just have to know. The patients have to know. And the only way they're going to know is if the surgeons are telling them about this and they're making sure they document it and sign the consent form and sign the informed consent that say, you may get breast implant illness. If you get these symptoms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you need to talk to somebody about getting your implants out, because that's really the travesty is these patients get implants and they don't know anything about BII, and they go for years or decades, like I said, without even knowing about this diagnosis, and they're just put into the medical monopoly and they don't get any better.
What's the number one trigger, the number one symptom you would say that you might want to look into BII?
Fatigue. brain fog, cognitive symptoms, word retrieval, sleep. Those are the big ones we hear. But it's like I said, it's so nonspecific. It's really tough to pinpoint.
General malaise.
Malaise, yeah, just feeling shitty.
Feeling shitty. Well, that's
feeling. Let me be more articulate. Feeling not like yourself all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
Like one day you feel good, and all of a sudden, and this happened to me. Like I can literally pinpoint the time where I was like, "Whoa, something's not right,"
Mm-hmm.
and it's that acute, And it's just like all of a sudden it hits you. And if you had implants in the past, I would definitely. I mean, I'm not saying you don't have something else. You might have something else,
Mm-hmm.
and that should be evaluated as well. But you should definitely put breast implant illness in what doctors would call the differential diagnosis, meaning that's a possibility that it's contributing to your symptoms.
Yeah, on that subject, I wanted to go over, we covered it a little bit, but what's your take on the systemic toxic load from implants to glyphosate, which is an herbicide, to microplastics stacking up inside of people right now? How does Explant fit into lowering that burden?
Yeah, I think it's all contributes, right? And so it's like I said, there's a bioaccumulation. You get toxins from your food, from your water, from your environment, from stress. Physical, mental, emotional stressors. They all contribute to inflammation in the body, and causes inflammation in the cell membrane. Dr. Pompa talks about this a lot. Heal the cell to get well. Life and death begins on the cell membrane. So you get these. Inflammation in the cell stops working like it should. Hormones can't get in, toxins can't get out. It causes mitochondrial dysfunction. This is where all the energy dysfunction comes in. You get emotional and immunologic dysregulation because of the mitochondrial dysfunction. That then triggers epigenetics in the actual nucleus of the cell that can contribute to other downstream potential issues like cancers. Because the cell is not able to adequately detox from this toxic burden. So, like I said, in my opinion, it's not necessarily the breast implants itself that caused the symptoms. It's all these other things that are piling up to the point where, and maybe, he makes the analogy, which works for a lot of patients. Some people have a smaller bucket. Maybe you've got a genetic predisposition. You've got some gene mutation or MTHFR or impaired detox pathway. So maybe your body can't tolerate as much. Or maybe you've got all these other toxic lifestyle factors. You're eating ultra-processed food, and you've got glyphosate exposure, and you're doing these other things that are also bioaccumulating in your body, and you got breast implants. So people always say, like, well, I got my friend had breast implants for 20 years and she's fine. So how do you know I'm going to get breast implants? Well, I would say to that, we don't know she's fine. I mean, she may feel like
asymptomatic.
She just, a lot of patients when they come in, we do have patients that come in and like, I don't know if I have BII, but we actually have them fill out like a symptom sheet. Like, do you have these symptoms? Well, now that you ask, yeah, I do notice that I am feeling this, and this. And then you take the implants out and they get better. So it may not be that they're fine. They just don't even know that they're fine. They just attribute it to aging or menopause or stress or, any of these other variables that can also cause similar symptoms.
So before I bring in Mo, I have one more question. I'm going to go get Mo after this. But what would you say to a woman who's terrified she'll lose her identity or femininity without implants?
Yeah, it's a really challenging discussion that we have. I think by the time patients are coming to see me or are serious about being explanted, they've already done their soul searching. They've gotten a lot of information. They've talked to their significant others, and they've come to the decision that they're going to. Should I keep talking? Troy just walked out, so we'll just riff for a while. Should I pause? How's it going? What do you think?
It's going good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good content?
Very good. Did you answer that?
I was waiting for you to come back.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
So the question was women that feel like they're going to lose their sexuality or femininity, after explanting it. It's a huge issue.
They could be terrified. I mean,
women are, they are terrified. Not only about, like you said, losing the confidence or the false confidence that they feel like the implants provide for them, but also
And they
you know,
could be older. I mean, it's
very
stacked.
very often the spouses or significant others are not supportive. I mean, it's great when they are, but sometimes they're not, and so there's concern about marital issues if they remove their implants. I've heard that many times. You know, they feel like they're not going to have that same relationship with their significant other, and it is a you know, very serious decision that women have to decide. You know, we'll be talking about this in a second, but it's, you know, it's something that people have to do some soul searching and decide, like, what's it worth to me? I can keep my implants and keep the appearance of the breast, which I like, which is why I got implants to begin with, or I'm going to have to sacrifice probably appearance-related issues for the long-term benefit of feeling better. And it's not a great choice. And so, like I said, it kind of sets up the relationship for potentially problems from the beginning, because the patients aren't really enthusiastic that they have to take their implants out. Like, they're happy to put their implants in, but they're not really enthusiastic to take them out, especially when you set the expectation from the beginning that, you know, we can take them out and go through all this surgery and reconstruction and everything else, but I can't promise you're going to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, based on our clinical experience now of hundreds of patients, like, I think you will feel better. I think you meet the criteria for breast implant illness. I think, you know, you're going to see significant improvement, but you may not. I mean, and we tell that to every patient, so
that's some
that expectation
serious
is
informed consent.
yeah. I mean, you have to say that to everybody. You may not get better.
But it sounds like there's also 100% of people that are like, wow, I feel better.
I think probably not 100%, but I'd say definitely the vast majority get better after surgery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. Let's bring in someone that actually has the breast implants and has gone through this whole process. And I think this is a beautiful experience, because I think it's going to help a lot more people. That's why I had Dr. Landon on here in the first place. And so my friend Mo, who helps me in this studio, she's going to come on, and we're going to talk about her situation. So thank you, Mo, for coming on, and here she is.
Hi, Mo. So
you have a doctor. He's a professional.
I can give a little backstory here if you don't mind, because it's just kind of an interesting evolution. So we were just obviously corresponding about the podcast, and you mentioned to me, like, I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say, because I have a history of breast augmentation, and, you know, I'm kind of deciding what I want to do.
Yes.
And I got here a little bit early, and we were just kind of talking about your circumstances. And, you know, I said to Troy, you know, I think you'd be a great real world example of, you know, what people experience, both as it relates to, you know, getting breast augmentation and then not having all the appropriate informed consent, and now having to decide, you know, what you want to do moving forward. You're a young woman, you know, you've got your whole life ahead of you. You know, you like the appearance of your breast, but you also don't want to put yourself at risk of, you know, being sick down the road. You have some other, you know, health issues to consider. So I guess, you know, talk with us about that a little bit.
Yeah. So taking it back, 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And thank you, Troy. Wow, I love that.
Doing your job now.
Holy cow. Amazing. Is this good, Jacob?
Is that good? Jacob?
Yeah. Okay, amazing. So 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and it was just a grave disease. You know, like I was mentioning earlier, I felt like I was in a really tumultuous relationship, and it just drummed up all this stuff. You know, I feel like as women, we internalize a lot of stress and anxiety.
Absolutely.
And all that. And so sure enough, I got sick, and
Before you knew it, you had your thyroid taken out.
yes, and before I knew it, I had my thyroid taken out. I had, you know, doctors, I got multiple different doctors that told me, you need to get this removed. Your body's working against you. And instead of doing the informed thing, which I would do now, had I known, I would have, you know, changed my diet. I would have gotten out of that relationship sooner. I would have, you know, just taken away all the, you know, things that I could have controlled at the time. But sure, I trusted my doctors, and I got my thyroid removed. And then the season of, you know, feeling really under the weather in terms of like brain fog and all of that started happening.
With no thyroid, that's not surprising, right?
Because you're just stuck on medication for the rest of your life, you know? So then, you know, a couple years passed, and my brother passed away. And I was still in this relationship. It was a mess up. And then I thought, you know what? Life is too short. I've always felt this insecurity about, you know, feeling like a woman And, I'm just a really slender person. And I thought, why not just do the thing that I've always been scared to do, which is to get breast implants. And it seems silly, but it was the one thing that I control that made me feel good. Like I just wanted to feel good in my skin. And it was me taking back, control of things that I couldn't, like losing my brother.
That's a really good point. And we haven't really talked about that, but I do think that a lot of people see breast augmentation and plastic surgery in general as a way to try to control, outcomes in their life that they can't, otherwise control.
Yeah, and it made me feel good afterwards. I just felt confident, and I was able to just get up and leave that relationship that I was in after that, and I just felt like I was the renewed me. Yeah. And so now here we are, 8 years later, and I still feel the feeling of brain fog. My body sometimes hurts, my hands still tremor. I still feel out of breath a lot of times. I'm dealing with like a lot of hormonal issues right now, thinking about having a baby. And if I knew what I knew now, I maybe would have taken a pause, with having the implants put in.
So we hear this a lot where women, there's a lot of guilt and shame associated with women that are going through their explant journey, and they blame themselves for not having known better, not having done their research before, and that doesn't help either.
Yeah.
That's more negative thought, negativity, self-blame. I mean, that continues to create more symptoms. But kind of going back to the beginning of your story, I'm curious because I don't think we talked about this. Why did they diagnose you with Hashimoto's?
Yeah, they diagnosed me with actually Graves' disease.
Oh, Graves, okay.
And so what was happening is that, I'd be sitting on the couch and I'd just be watching TV and my heart would just race out of my chest. And for a long time, I was getting misdiagnosed. I would go to the emergency room. I went about 5 times before they diagnosed me. And they said, you have anxiety. They would prescribe me Xanax. And I would sit there and say, no, I'm losing hair in chunks, and my hands are shaking. And you would think that I ran a marathon just sitting on the couch, like something's not right, and your body the best.
And this is before you got implants, just to be clear. So, I mean, and again, I don't know your medical history, but it certainly is possible that you had, Graves' disease from some, underlying genetic predisposition or, some environmental influence that triggered it.
Right.
But, I think that, having a total thyroidectomy at 26 is, pretty drastic. And I certainly would expect that you're going to continue to have symptoms afterwards. But then kind of fast forwarding to, when and why you got implants a few years down the road. And this is something that I think women should also be knowledgeable about. Like if you are susceptible to, an autoimmune condition like Graves' disease, or, even the literature says, that article that I quoted, if you've got a tendency towards inflammation, allergies, that type of stuff, that should probably be a red flag that like you're probably a setup for getting breast implant illness, right? Because your body's just, it's like a woman that gets a keloid. Like, if you do another surgery, you're probably going to get another keloid. It's just the way that your body handles, the toxins in your body, and it causes this exaggerated inflammatory response. And, probably for somebody like you, you would have been better off not getting implants. But nothing you can do about that now. And
hindsight's 20/20 for sure.
What's even more, upsetting to me is nobody talked with you about that. You never had any conversation about breast implant illness. Your surgeon was just like, yeah, quick, easy, put them in.
Yes.
Nothing to worry about. And you actually have textured implants.
Yes, I do, which is another, something that always comes up. The anxiety of now having the implants that I do, I went with what my doctor recommended to me, and that was his favorite implant to put in.
Of course, and you went with your
and
doctor's
so I just
recommendation,
trusted it. Yes.
Of course. And
so now hearing that people aren't really fans of textured implants, that's another thing that kind of weighs on me, because now after all of these issues that I've had, with having the thyroidectomy and then feeling the way I did and then having the breast implants put in, I do feel like I've become a semi-hypochondriac where I'll just, always think, is there something more to this? Like, am I feeling this way because X, Y, and Z? And with textured, there is potential risks.
Yeah, well, there are risks with all implants. We talked about that. The whole texturing, we could go deep on that, but probably not enough time for that. But, so now that, and did you know about BII before today?
know. And I think this conversation just wasn't being had at all back then. You know, I just had friends that had implants and everybody felt great. And everybody just said, it's the best thing you can do for yourself. You should do it. You'll feel great. You'll look great. You know, all those things. But now going on social media and so many people are speaking about getting explants surgery done because of feeling unwell. You know, normally you would just feel unwell and you think, oh, I'm just not feeling great.
Yeah, especially, you know, nowadays everybody, like we talked about, doesn't feel well, right?
Sure.
I mean, there's lots of reasons
Yeah.
not to feel well, but in this, you know, post-COVID era. But
Right.
yeah, it's, I mean, so like now you know about BII, probably
Yes.
better than most people.
Mm-hmm.
What, knowing that you've got these implants in and knowing that, you know, most likely they're contributing to inflammation in your
Sure.
body. You don't necessarily have symptoms of BII yet, but I think obviously we know that's a possibility. The longer they're in, you know, the more
Right.
potential you have to develop symptoms. What's your main reluctance with getting them out?
You know, now I feel like they're just part of my identity. It's such a weird, you know, concept because obviously you'd hate to be, you know, superficial. But now I know me with these. I can't even remember the me without them, you know, and it's only been 8 years. So it's not even like I lived with them the majority of my life. But now, you know, it's just part of who I am. So I feel like once I remove them, a little piece of me won't feel the same as it does today, you know. My husband doesn't care. I love that my husband doesn't care.
Right.
You know, he said to me before, just get him out, you know. And I'm grateful for that, but I'm more hesitant to do it because of my own personal reasons. You know, sometimes I think, am I going to remove them and not feel any better because I have an autoimmune condition anyway? Because if that's the case, then the hell
Maybe,
with
but
it.
maybe, but then you don't have to, you know, wonder, is it my
Right.
implants, you
Sure.
know, contributing to my
Yeah.
issues?
I'm sure a lot of women wonder, like, oh, if I get them removed, will I feel any better? You know, that's
Yeah, it's a very important question to ask yourself.
Sure.
And I everybody that I know that does ethical explant surgery tells patients that we can't make any kind of guarantees or promises that you're
Right.
going to feel better after surgery. I mean, that's like a very clear disclaimer we make.
Right.
You know, the two things that I usually tell patients are, you know, we don't know if you're going to feel better, and you know, from an aesthetic standpoint, like for me, the priority is getting you feeling better. That's priority number one. Priority two is the aesthetics of the breast. But, you know, there's some things that can contribute to aesthetic outcomes that you probably aren't going to be happy about because you got the implants for a reason. You like the way the breasts look, generally speaking, with the implants in. I'm going to be taking those implants out. You know, we can do a lift, we can do a fat transfer. There's things we can do to try to make the breast look as good as possible, but it's probably
Right.
going to be a step backwards, you know,
Yeah.
compared to what you want. So it has to be worth it to you.
right.
So, I mean, we can go a little bit deeper, but what do you think you're going to be, you know, missing out on, or what's going to be lacking in your life without breast implants? Because you said you're married, so it's not
Yes.
like, you know,
Yeah,
it's
I
not
mean,
like
I
that
really
mate
don't-
selection
it's
we
not like-
talked about. So,
You know, when I originally got them, and people will say, oh, that's a lot, but I really got them because I wanted to feel more feminine and I wanted to feel good in my skin, you know. Because I'm like a slender person, I feel like I didn't have tons of shape, you know. And no matter how hard you work out and you try to, nothing's gonna, you know, compensate for this, right? And so once I got them done, I felt like I looked the most me in terms of being the most feminine, and I had curves, and that got me, you know, excited. So I think if anything, it's not about removing them and feeling anything but the fact that I just feel feminine and I feel good in my skin. That's the only reason why I did it. I never wanted it for male attention, or I never wanted it for, you know, I didn't want to dress provocatively. I just wanted to feel like me, you know, even though this isn't the real me.
you got a tough choice to make.
Yes,
I mean, I know you'll do
do.
your homework and, you know,
Yes.
get as much information as you
But
can. And
I am grateful because
think about-
conversations like this, you know, need to be had. And
well, at least you know now. That's the important
Right.
thing. So whether it's next month or next year or
Sure.
5 years down the road, if you develop symptoms, you know, like, okay, like it's time to get my implants
Right.
out. And I'm confident at some point you will come to that conclusion.
yes.
And we haven't even talked about, you know, fertility and breastfeeding
Right.
and, you know, all of these other associated issues with starting a family with implants. But
Right.
I think you'll eventually come to the conclusion, like, I feel confident in my skin, and like the risk benefit ratio just doesn't make sense for me anymore. Like
Right.
I want to get them out. But that's all. Everybody has to make their own decisions in the right time for them.
Sure.
And so that's you're on the journey.
Thank you.
Yeah, my
I
pleasure.
appreciate you. No, I loved having this conversation with you today because it's interesting. I never thought of putting a breast implant in would be an inflammation, marker. I never thought of that at all.
Why would you, right? I
Right.
mean, you just go in, you listen to your doctor, they
Right.
put implants in, you walk out with boobs, and you're like, all right, like,
Yeah, you're fired up.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's the craziest thing. Like, I obviously have this autoimmune condition. I obviously know that my body is, fighting itself, and there's things that are, not kosher. And then introducing the breast implant, I never thought, oh, that's going to inflame me even more. I just assume that because I don't have, let's say, something like capsular contracture where my body isn't showing me, that there's a problem.
there's a problem, right?
That I'm okay. And even sitting in this chair today, I think it's been a kind of really awakening that I've had, thinking, my gosh, like I actually introduced something into my body and I'm only inflaming it more. I already have an underlying condition and now I'm making it worse.
Well, again, we can only do as good as the information that we had at the time to make the
Right.
decision. So you
Yeah.
can't, blame yourself.
Yeah.
And, you just have to use it to, make decisions moving forward. And so I'm certainly not the podcast host, but I mean, I guess like if you have any kind of message from the information that, we've talked about today that you'd like to convey to
Yeah.
women that are either thinking about getting breast implants or thinking about getting their breast implants out.
Yeah, if anything, I would give the same advice to myself is really in all facets, not just, with like the breast implants, for example. It's anything with your health, really take charge and do the work and look into everything that you're doing. If I could go back, would I have had a thyroidectomy? Probably not. I would have done some dietary things first. If I could, would I have gotten breast implants? I'm not really sure, actually, if I would have. So I think it's really just do the research and don't just take everything for face value. Obviously a breast implant surgeon isn't going to have any work if no implants are being
Yeah.
put in,
So like I told you, I just had dinner last night with Dr. Pierce, Desert
Mm-hmm.
Plastic Surgery. He's right here in Scottsdale. So
Yeah.
if you decide you want to do something locally, I'm sure he could do a great job. We're looking to expand our geographic footprint of
Mm-hmm.
practices that are part of our platform that all specialize in doing BII. That's where we got the BII Centers of Excellence. That's kind of our sub-brand of Pryor Health. So, if anybody's interested in getting more information about it, it's BII Centers of Excellence, and that's specific to patients that are wanting to get information about breast implant illness or explant surgery. Now, Dr. Pierce, I'm just kind of giving him a plug here because we had dinner last night, but he's right here locally, and I'm sure he would do a great job if you want to stay local. But definitely do your information, get your information, do your homework. Happy to
Yes.
talk with you about this more offline if you
Okay.
want to talk about next steps.
Thanks, Dr. Pryor. I love it.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
back to you, Troy. Cut this out.
Yeah, you got control of the editing, right? So we might
Yeah, we
might
got-
not see this in the
We-
final roll.
Yeah, we've got control of the editing, but that's going to be great, Mo. Thank you so much for that, and so that's going to help a lot of people, hopefully women. And back to what Mo was talking about, as far as shame and guilt, and I talk about this on my show all the time. I am for the upliftment of humanity, and I have big points of contention with people, fitness trainers especially, that are on drugs and steroids, and they're not telling their audience that, like the Liver King. This is kind of a bait and switch. So besides that, and being kind of against, it's not that I'm against steroids and peptides and these other kind of injections, and I'm not trying to shame and guilt the people, the end user. I'm here to bring awareness and options and results from these types of choices, as opposed to implying that your big muscles come from diet and exercise and stuff like that. And when it comes to Mo or any women that is out there with breast implants, this is not about shame or guilt. This is about choice. This is about knowledge. Knowledge is power. Knowledge applied is power. All knowledge is knowledge of self. And so I'm very grateful, Landon, that you've come on here to share your expertise and spoke with an incredible lexicon on this subject with your medical expertise, et cetera. I think this podcast is extremely valuable and will be very well received. Not only that, but we have, a patient here that has gone through this, and she's gone through multiple medical procedures. And so I like using her as an example. And, my introduction is I'm here to bring you more fun, freedom, and phenomenon. And part of the freedom is having the understanding of our choices and what these choices may bring. And then, of course, now the choices for the breast implant illness, explant surgery, and what that could potentially bring as a choice for someone that may not be putting two and two together. So again, not about shame and guilt, except for people that are maybe promoting this certain procedures without the informed consent and the bigger understanding of, hey, there is yin and there is yang for your choices. Do you understand the light and the dark, both sides of it, of any choice that you make, really, that we're living in the life? And I just think that when we're utilizing these exogenous materials, externalizing our life, and most of the answers, as you said as well, spiritually, when you're talking to these people, or spiritually to heal yourself, it's an inside job.
Yeah, you can't outsource it, right? You gotta make the corrections on the inside, and then the outside will reflect that.
Yes. So thank you again for coming. Please plug everything, just so you can cut it up and we can cut it up.
Plug everything. So if
Website, practice, Chicago, West Palm.
So if anybody's interested in getting information about breast implant illness or explant surgery, I personally am seeing patients out of Palm Beach for my explant practice, and we've got a phenomenal technician and surgeon and physician, Dr. Sood, with my advocate, Laura, in Rockford, outside of Chicago. We're both on the same website. It's BIIcentersofexcellence.com. My advocate down in Palm Beach is Yvette, and like I said, Laura and Dr. Sood are in Rockford. And we're looking to expand our geographic footprint and bring together like-minded surgeons that are really on a mission to help women suffering from BII with empowering them with the information they need to make the right decision for them. So hopefully this podcast has helped people understand the nuances about BII, and hopefully we'll save some lives by communicating this to the public. And definitely here to help anybody that has any questions or is interested in talking about explant surgery.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Landon.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you, Mo, for coming on, and Zabac Studios in the house. Jacob, the man.